Well, this is a fine mess I've got myself into, isn't it? Hello everyone, and today you might notice that the name of the ship is very different than what I've been saying it was going to be. I kept saying it was going to be the Columbia class. I'd completely forgotten I'd already done the Columbia class. I'm sort of going, wow, it's great doing this ship, I already have all the notes, it's brilliant. Without thinking, hang on, why do I have the notes? Why do I have the notes? But luckily, well, this has arrived recently. And so I thought I would do a bit more about French cruisers. I know I tend to like to balance and do some about the American cruisers and give you a bit more balance, but I have done an entire series on US cruisers, admittedly treaty-era cruisers. So I felt this seemed a bit fairer. Now, I have to admit, to read this section, because this book is one of those books which is absolutely crammed, and whilst I have fairly decent eyesight, when I have the light there as a source behind the screens, so that it provides the right kind of light over me so I don't look like I do now, when I've got a light here side, it doesn't really illuminate this area for me to read. And if I turn on the overhead light, it's really not good. But this lovely book has all sorts of sections in it, and all sorts of discussions about the Châteaurenault. And I'm going to use it as my starting point for the discussion. And for this very interesting, very interesting vessel. So, this is a table entitled Main Characteristics of the Protected Cruisers, Guerchin, Châteaurenault, and Jurin de la Grave. Now, interesting enough, they're all considered their own individual ships. They're not a class. However, this is probably because, let's be honest, if you tried to make them a class, anyone else who was building free cruise at this time, they'd probably be a class. But in France, the Guerchin is built at Ateliers et Chantiers de Loire between 1895 and 99. The Châteaurenault is forged at Chantiers de Méditerranée, 1896 to 1902, and the Jurin de la Grave is built in Lorient, 1897 to 1903. See the problem? The Guerchin, 8,151 tons. The Châteaurenault, 7,898 tons. And the Jurin de la Grave, 5,595 tons. Guerchin, 139 meters overall. Châteaurenault, 137. Jurin de la Grave, 137. Breadth, 17 for Guerchin and Châteaurenault, 15 for Jurin de la Grave. Draft, 7.49 for Guerchin, Châteaurenault, 7.39, and Jurin de la Grave, 6.3. Machinery, Guerchin, 36 Langerfeld de l'Est boilers. Châteaurenault, 14 Normand Single-D boilers, with both of them supplying free vertical triple expansion engines and free shafts. But the Jurin de la Grave, 24 Gueux de Temple boilers, free vertical triple expansion engines, free shafts. And I can tell you right now, there are multiple logisticians and engineers who are going to be maintaining these ships who are already hitting their heads against the wall. Maximum power, shaft horsepower. Guerchin, 25,000. Châteaurenault, 23,000. Jurin de la Grave, 17,400. Maximum speed. For Guerchin, 23.5. Châteaurenault, 24. Jurin de la Grave, 22.9. Endurance, 7,500 nautical miles at 12 knots. For Guerchin and Châteaurenault, 6,115 nautical miles at 10 knots for Jurin de la Grave. And it just gets more interesting from there. And it all gets really summed up with this little explanation paragraph. The table on page 1155 lists the main features of Goshen, Châteaurenault, and Giron de la Grave. These three protected cruisers represented a sort of prototype for a resulting warship of scarce military value, apart from some colonial duties. Their protection scheme was basically untested against enemy shells, and the sinking of Châteaurenault highlighted the vulnerability of the then modern warships against underwater threats. Although conceived as fast commerce raiders, French protected cruisers often experienced machinery troubles, and some of them did not even attain their design speed. This was an additional issue that would make the planned Corsair cruisers almost useless against some of the fast liners being commissioned at the time by Germany and Britain. Finally, when most of the French protected cruisers were being laid down, the Navy had already committed to the armoured cruisers. So basically, they're a product no one wants. At a time, no one wants them. So why are they building them? Well, it's back to our old friends, who this episode was apparently going to be about. And here are the Châteaurenault, and this is the Goshen. So this one's a Goshen, Châteaurenault, this one. Beautiful pictures in this book. Absolutely beautiful book. You will already notice if you watched the brew ships, which will be out on the 13th of November, because I'll be discussing it a lot. The Columbia class had come out as this brainchild to be this wonderful surface raider that was going to really, how do I put this politely, scared the bejesus out of Britain. There are two problems with scaring the bejesus out of Britain. Two problems. One, they have a habit of building their own ships. And if you build something which is light and designed to go very fast, it will probably bump into things which are designed to go slightly less fast, but have some armour and have a little bit more firepower just to go, hello, yes, this is what we're protecting. Because despite the interesting results of submarine warfare and the desire as to whether to convoy or not, and this is one of the strange scenarios you have going on in the world at this point. In the 1890s, the British actually did think convoying was the sensible option. I know, I gave you a second there to think that through. It's a shock, it's a horror. But it's not convoying like you or I might imagine the convoys of World War II. Think of it as one of those lovely Apollo class, second class protected cruisers, sitting with a dozen or so merchant ships, wandering along. Now, this comes up. It might win the fight versus the Apollo class. It could do. But it's going to get damaged, and the Apollo class will not probably go down fighting, because again, that is what the British should do. It always sounds so logical when people go, you're faced with overwhelming odds, you should withdraw. Why not? Apart from its moral ascendancy thing and all that sort of stuff British are doing, but also in this scenario, they'd be thinking about, let's protect these merchant ships. The longer we can keep the surface raider, whether it's the Columbia, the Goshen, or whatever, fighting us, the more likely it is we can get them away and they will survive, which is our purpose, and we can call for help, which will come in and kill it. Because the thing is, there would also be wandering around something a little bit bigger and a little bit nastier to go, you sunk my mate. You sunk my sister from another... I can't say that out loud, because whilst it's a common phrase used for shipyards, it will come across really badly on YouTube. But You sunk my sister from another insert word of choice. It wouldn't be good. Now, why, faced with the submarine threat and all those things, does the British then change? Well, because you can't fight the submarine like that. And it's interesting to note that there really isn't, while surface raiders are a factor in the First World War, they're not much of a factor in the Atlantic. It's submarines which are. And how do you deal with convoy with the submarine is a whole different kettle of fish. But life happens. Anyway, so these are the surface raider vessels. And before you think I've cut it off at the end, no, that's the bow. If you look very carefully at the picture, if I expand it so you can see, you'll see that I have not cut anything there. That is the actual bow shape. That is the guichen. So basically, the French are reacting to the Americans constructing these commerce raiding ships and thinking, ooh, we'd like something of that. And then they're building their own. And there's problems with them. What's interesting about the American ones is, of course, they're both built by Cramp and Sons, who build quite good ships. Even if the US Senate does turn around and go, well, the shipyard we were going to give this to because they're cheaper than you can't actually do this because they don't have the ability to. So what we're going to do is give it to the job to you as long as you do it at the price they were promising to do it, which is $55,000 less. That's a sort of case of, yeah, the reason they were trying to do $55,000 less and they cut it off is because they couldn't actually do it. So, by the way, that was Bath Iron Works. At the time, not as good as they are today. So, the Châteaurenault comes about because the Junecol's other foil, as I've often talked about, is its commerce raider arm. The idea was to attack the global nature of the British Empire, and instead of trying to challenge them one for one, to draw them into fighting all around the world. As such, these ships are interestingly armed. And they're supposed to be fast. They're supposed to be capable. But, as said, the French Navy was already turning to the armoured cruiser. Why? Because if you're not building a capital ship, i.e. a battleship, you need to fill something that can fulfill those sort of roles. And an armoured cruiser is this period's equivalent of, and often carries heavier guns and firepower than some battleships, so yeah, they can look like a battleship. They are the generation's late 19th century's proto battle cruiser. This is why I often try to explain to people that actually the idea of cruisers being bigger and more heavily armed than battleships is not new. The point about a battleship is it was trying to meet in the middle of the firepower, armour and speed triangle. The point about a cruiser is it tends to go off towards the line between firepower and speed. I've talked about this triangle before on various videos, and I probably am going to rework the graphic and do it again in the year of technology. But this is the important thing. Cruisers are to one side of the triangle. Battleships are supposed to be into the centre of it. And battle cruisers have the fun with that one. So this is the Guichen. And she's the first real attempt to build a French equivalent to the Columbia class. And it honestly doesn't go the way the French were hoping it would go. They were expecting it to cause the British to panic. But the British are already churning out second-class cruisers. That's the whole point. You can't be everywhere, but you can be the places you need to be, and as long as you've got something in the places where you need to be, you're fine. As a result, though, here comes the Châteaurenault, which is started at a different yard a year later, and couldn't be more different. Despite being theoretically and prima facie, on, if it's simple reading of text could be quite similar, is a completely different design. Look, they're both chosen to have 4 funnels, right? If we go back, 4 funnels. So they look like a liner. That does not look like a liner. That looks like 2 ships going in opposite directions, at best. This looks like it could be passing for a liner. And it has a beautiful arrangement of boilers. I'll get onto those in a second. But what it is a vessel which is designed, theoretically, for speed. Which is why it actually looks like a liner. It's got a liner-style bow. It's got liner-style shaping. It's supposed to be taken for a liner at long range. Now, there is a small but quite obvious flaw to this scenario. In any war, liners, as we know from the First World War, etc., get taken up to be used as troop ships, fast transports, armed merchant cruisers. All sorts of duties can be found for a liner. And then we consider the nations which actually have large liners flying their flags. They're all quite major powers. But there aren't many of them. So, by its definition, even a liner will be of interest enough that even a regular liner will probably be something a warship will want to check out. So it's kind of like the Type 23s, which were supposed to look like large fishing boats on radar. It's a very clever idea. Apart from when you start applying the brain cell, well, hang on, why is there a large fishing boat sitting in the middle of the ocean, not near any fishing grounds, in the middle of a war zone? Why are you bringing your large fishing boat into the middle of a war zone to begin with? See, small problem. Yes, it's a wonderful idea. You can imagine that meeting. This ship is going to look like a liner. This ship on radar will look like a large fishing boat. Why is a fishing boat going to be there? Why is a liner wandering around this area? Think about it again. Where do liners run? What are their routes? Do you often see liners wandering around just randomly? No, it's usually the slower merchant ships who go off. The liners do the transatlantic route. They may do the trans-Pacific routes. But that's the specific ones. There are a few which do the routes out to Australia, etc. But again, they're all quite rare and special things, and when you see one, you're going to go check on it, aren't you? It's like if you're a patrol aircraft and you're doing a radar sweep and you detect a large fishing boat in the middle of a war zone, this might be just me talking to you, but I can imagine the pilot conversation with the aircraft commander, etc., going something like, "Nothing you can see other than a couple of large fishing boats over in that direction." Why a couple of large fishing boats in the water, out in the water in this area? Oh, we'll go see and just look into what's going on. Cover blown. I can understand the idea, and at long range, when you're in an innocent area, especially in peacetime, that's probably going to help. But in wartime, it's not going to help at all. I don't know. But here is the design. And again, it's worthwhile looking at these weapons. Now, centerline, fore and aft, are the big guns. Otherwise, in casemates and, well, let's be honest and call them what they are, wing mounts, you have the secondaries. And they're good weapon systems. The 6.5-inch guns can fire solid cast iron projectiles, explosive armor piercing, and semi-armor piercing shells. The 2 on sponsons amidships allowed for enhanced forward firing in theory, if you want to have the joy of potentially hitting yourself, and but realistically provide quite a lot of coverage. And let's be honest, the triple shaft, triple engine arrangement does provide you with a certain degree of security when it's your turns to be moving around. Arm protection, of course, consisted of Harvey steel. It's not Krupp, but it's Harvey, which is good for its time. All in all, it's a nice looking ship, and it's the thing is, I could actually get behind this design quite a bit if it wasn't a one-off. If they weren't all one-offs, because my big problem ultimately with the French Navy in this period is that everything is a one-off. And to stop it being that, you're going to have to invest in infrastructure and control, and you're going to have to, for want of a better word, start whacking people with a baseball bat. I'm sorry, YouTube, that's not me suggesting violence. But just a little rap on the knuckles to go, no, bad designer, stop making changes. Just copy and paste. Copy and paste from this central design. Copy and paste. Nope! No minor modifications. No, this is the great ship I'm building. No, bad designer. So, I'm not suggesting violence in terms of hurting people. Just a light rap over the knuckles to stop the designers deciding to go, well, no. Just no. No. But, and I say this as well, there is certainly a realism if you look at the ship and you're going, think it through. Think what you're designing this ship for. Think what it's going to be viable for. If this is a commerce raiding ship, and if it's going to be doing commerce duties, good. But where are the torpedoes? Where is the stuff that's going to give it a chance if it runs into something bigger and nastier to run away? It's going to allow it to bide the time. Because the armoured deck is 40 to 100 millimeters, or 1.6 to 3.9 inches. So that's not going to buy much time. Arranged football style, 4-4-2. 442. I was considering making a train joke, but I decided to go with a football joke. But technically it is 4442. I know, I wanted the football joke to work, so I dropped the extra 4. So it's for each of these funnels, if we go back here, you have a different boiler on. You have 4 boilers going to 3 of the funnels and 2 to the other. Again, it's... how do I put this politely? It's designed to try and provide her the balance and power she needs. Mostly it works. I have to admit, mostly it works. She is, as French ships go, she's fairly reliable as French ships go. And she has 23,000 indicated horsepower, driving thanks to 3 triple expansion of steam engines, which drives 3 shafts, giving a top speed of 24 knots, or range of 7,500 nautical miles. Which is good. 24 knots, fine for this period. It even will provide a 3 knot advantage over Dreadnought when she comes out. Although, by the time Dreadnought's in the water, I would doubt if this vessel can actually maintain 24 knots for any length of time, and so a 21 knot Dreadnought probably could catch her. And there's nothing she could do about it. 604 crew. 604. Her career, well, that was a good thing. During her endurance tests on the 8th of August, after she was launched in 1900, she was launched in 1898, but didn't commence sea trials till March 1900. She achieved a cruising speed of 21 knots for 20 hours. At this speed, her engine suffered from excessive vibration. Nice phrase for saying the brass bearings were literally being shaken apart by the engine's movements, and so had to be replaced with steel bearings. This delayed her completion by a further 5 months, and speed tests in 1902 she actually reached a speed of 24.15 knots. Basically, they hadn't wanted to go the full speed she was supposed to be capable of, because she looked like she was going to blow herself apart. When commissioned, she goes to China. As of 1903, she, along with Montcalm and Beauregard and Pascal, were the vessels on station. She remained there through mid-1904, along with Sully, Guerdon and Montcalm, and of course was joined by Descartes and de Assas. Pascal, I think, had gone home at that point. Then she is recalled to France. In 1905, she returns to the Far East with Guchen, her not sister, to join Sully, Guerdon and Montcalm. Although Sully, by this point, was out of action due to an accidental grounding. And Châteaurenault is only out there briefly because she returns to France in 1906. She spends the year 1907 in reserve, and in 1908 she's selected to be converted into a fast mine layer. This is certainly a ship which looks like a mine layer. To be honest, thanks to the angle of that design, I almost feel like you could just stock the mines up and just let gravity take them off the end. But no, it doesn't really work like that. But it is an interesting construction. the French Admiralty believed that her liner-style construction, which was supposed to help her with being a commerce raider, would mean that she would evade detection while laying minefields. Again, because another thing liners are known to do, hanging around in an area, going backwards and forwards. Or maybe she's just laying one string of mines. The trouble is, if you lay a string of mines which are just one line long, and you just go in one line, that can stretch a long, long way and can be places where you don't want mines. There are issues here, but they've got ideas. So I will not critique someone for having ideas. I'll critique the quality of the ideas, but not for having them. It's always good to know people are thinking. Cogito ego sum. To quote from a previous French cruiser video. By 1911, she was assigned to Reserve Division of the Mediterranean Squadron, based in Toulon. And this unit originally included the Victor Hugo and the Jules Michel, as well as the Jurien de la Gravière, which basically had spent its life in them. Later that year, it was strengthened with the Jules Ferret. Again, I love these French names. They sound so cool. In World War I, she's assigned to the 2nd Light Squadron, which was based in the English Channel. Already starting to worry about this one. The unit consisted of the Marseille, the Amour, the Jeanne d'Arc, the Gloire, the Gourdon, and the Dupet Fouaz. Oh, this is not going to get good word, is it? It was based at Brest, and along with La Vieussaire, the squadron was strengthened by the addition of several other cruisers over the following days. Oh, they're adding in more. The Kleber, the Essex, the La Vieussaire, the Estries, France, Gushen, and auxiliary cruisers. They then conducted patrols in English Channel in conjunction with a force of 4 British cruisers, which are probably looking at them going, okay, none of you are designed for actually having a fight with an enemy ship. You're all supposed to be commerce raiders. Please, if whatever happens, just hang back and give us some fire support. Hang back and give fire support. Please. In 1915, she moved to Mediterranean. And in 1916, though, was sent to reinforce the 3rd Light Division, which consisted of Gloire, Gourdon, and Dupet Fouaz, based in French Senegal, to patrol for French German commerce raiders operating in the South Atlantic. That sounds like a good job for her. It actually does. This could be getting better. I do know what happens, but I'm trying to give you a bit of trepidation. She joined the search for the SMS Mal in September of that year, and then she moved back to the Eastern Mediterranean by October. On the 4th of October, the troop ship SS Gallia, a converted passenger liner, guess what it was doing? Carrying 2,000 soldiers and crew to Greece, was torpedoed and sunk by a German submarine. More than 1,300 died before Châteaurenault passed through the area the next day and picked up survivors. They hadn't managed to get a signal off. So no one had known. At this point, though, the French got worried, as they felt the U-boats were particularly going to target large cruisers and vessels which looked like ocean liners. So they ordered Châteaurenault and the rest of the division to return home. In December 1917, she was steaming to Salonika, carrying nearly 1,000 soldiers to take part in the Allied intervention in Greece. She passed through the Gulf of Corinth and encountered UC-38. That's a German type UC-2 mine-laying submarine, what is possibly the most successful submarine type of World War I, which managed to do something almost amazing. they hit the Châteaurenault with a single torpedo, which inflicted fatal damage. Now, that sounds almost amazing. Not that a single torpedo did fatal damage, frankly, considering the internal construction of these ships and the way they've been designed in the 1890s, I'm not surprised. But what is interesting is that the single torpedo actually hit. She fired one and it scored one hit. That's skill. The Nobel laureate happened to be aboard at the time, Ronald Ross, and he talked about his sinking in his memoirs. Now, I've only seen excerpts of that, but what he discussed is that she sank slowly enough for her escorting destroyers, the Mameluke and Lasquent, and various nearby drifters, to take off the crew that they could. Only casualties were engineering personnel who'd been killed by the torpedo explosion itself. UC-38 actually was attempting to maneuver to fire a second shot into Châteaurenault while she was sinking. This is a fatal mistake for UC-38, and one of the reasons why we know UC-38 was the submarine involved, because she revealed her position while doing so, and Mameluke and Lasquent launched depth charges. They forced the U-boat to the surface, and they hit her with their guns. The German survivors were also picked up by destroyers. They dropped the German submarine survivors at Patras and the survivors from the Châteaurenault at Atia. She's a good ship. And it's interesting to note that she's designed to look like a ocean liner and ends up getting sunk doing a job which was normally done by converted ocean liners. Troop transport. But again, warships aren't unusual for these things as well. Surface raiders are a perfectly legitimate strategy for you to pursue. But, and I would say the French actually have more advantages in pursuing this than the Germans, considering their empire and territories around the world. They have spaces to support these operations of these vessels from, which will require significant amphibious military efforts and naval efforts by the British to neutralise. That's not to say the British hadn't done that in previous wars, but it takes time to do so. But the French are producing, as I keep complaining in these 19th century videos, one-off ships. They're not producing classes. They're not producing anything which is logistically sound. If we go back to this lovely page 151, if I remember correctly, we'll see how well I've remembered. Have I remembered well? Hmm. 155. So it wasn't too bad. The Gershon had 36 Langerfeld d'Arrest boilers, the Châteaurenault 14 Normandy Singulier boilers, and the Julien de la Grave 24 Gueux de Temple boilers. You cannot support such ships operating at long range from your country if you have no logistical standardization. You make yourselves a living nightmare. Everything becomes a one-off. Everything becomes more difficult and more expensive. And I'm not saying the British were perfect in this, because trust me, they weren't. They were only saved by the fact that they were producing sheer quantity, that they never, very rarely had one ship in that combination. They usually had 2 or 3 at least. And that's their saving grace. It's not much of a saving grace, but it's a saving grace. The ultimate trouble, though, for these ships is that what would have really made them work? If we go back to this design, to this sort of looking vessel, it's perfectly fine as a commerce raider, really. But I already mentioned torpedoes. They wouldn't seem out of place on a vessel at this period. And also, I would have to say again, what is my necessity if I have one of these ships? My necessity is I put down my opponent as quickly as possible. Whether they are a merchant ship, whether they are an enemy warship which I happen to come across and I can't escape from, I need to knock them out as quickly as possible. I've got 6.4-inch guns here. Now, you can sit there and make the case, and very simple case, well, hang on, there's not much of a range advantage of 6.4 versus a 5.5 in all intents and practical terms in this period, and you're correct. They've got the same range advantage, the same likelihood of hitting their target. 5.5 inch is not even going to fire that much more quickly than 6.4. They're both crew-served weapons. So your choice is, would it be better to replace the 6.4s with 5.5s? Maybe try and get some sort of twin 5.5 arrangement going, maybe fore and aft? Or is it sensible to replace the 5.5s with 6.4s? Couldn't you even do that? I think you probably could. I think you might have to change it to 2 sponsons rather than 4 casemates and 2 sponsons. So it might be 4 sponsons. But you could probably do that and have 6.4 guns and all posts. And again, this is not something which wasn't happening at the time. There were ships being looked at, designs being considered, which were all uniform battery ships. And that's the phrase you're looking for, a uniform main battery. It's sensible the smaller the ship is. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. My own question to you, and I've asked variations of this before. If you were going to, in the 1890s, design a ship to look like anything in order to pass unnoticed, I've already pointed the problems out with designing it to look like a liner. What ship would you pick? While still retaining warfighting and actually being a warship. So it can look like a ship, but it's got to be a warship. It's got to look enough like a warship that it's not a obvious thing it's designed to be a surface raider. It's got to be enough of a warship that you can have it doing the warship roles. Which, let's be honest, this ship is. It looks like a liner in terms of its 4 funnels, etc., and its shaping, but it's obviously not. So that's that. Secondly, again, I know I've said this in every video this week, but I'm going to keep saying it because I need your help. Please. As I've said in the videos, if you haven't seen the others, please let me explain something. My mum and sister, and my mum and my aunt are twins. My cousins, my family, we bet on family things. This is how we do. But we bet strange things, like, for example, the bet I'm talking about, on one side, my aunt is going to buy my mum a lovely box of very fancy bath stuff and things, which she'd quite like. If Mum loses, she has to bake a cake and give a few other things to my aunt. So it's things like that. It's nice stuff. It's not anything bad. But the trouble is, they've been betting on whether or not I will get to 10,000 subscribers by Christmas for the last couple of years. And so far, my mum has lost every time. And I know I've said this every year, but every year I get the same issues coming up, and I'd really like to make this the last year. I'd like it to be one. I've made them promise me that, and the only promise I've managed to get, because there's a rule in our family betting, okay, so basically you cannot bet on it's the person who wins who gets to decide whether you can bet on the same thing again. So if you win the bet, you get to decide it. My aunt, so far, it's been a very successful thing for her to bet against and get cakes baked for her. So she's not going to do it. But my mum has said, if I win, I don't have to. She'll make sure it's not the topic of their bet for next year. So please, help a guy out. Share, subscribe, like, do whatever you can. But help me get to 10,000 subscribers so I can earn some. So on Christmas Day, my mum is happy with me. Oh, I feel like such a thing saying that. I'm in the middle of my 30s, I should not be saying these things, but you know, family matters. As I say to other people all the time, there are things. Earning money always outranks spending money in terms of your life, but family always outranks both. And this is family. Thank you very much everyone for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And I'm sorry it wasn't the Columbia class, but I hope you liked the Châteaurenault. Take care and have fun.